right. So, for those of you who are watching this on the YouTube video, we're moving into what's called the Aeolus section, which largely takes place in the newspaper office and is quite a windy section, um, as you can expect journalists in windbags to be. So, with that being said, we'll begin the reading. In the heart of the Hibernian metropolis. Before Nelson's Peller trams slowed, shunted, changed trolley, started for Blackrock, Kingstown, and Dalkey, Clonskia, Rathgar, and Tenero, Palmerston Park and Upper Rathmines, Sandymount Green, Rathmines, Ringsend, and Sandymount Tower, Harold's Cross. The Horse Dublin United Tram Company timekeeper bawled them off. The Rathguard and Tenor, come on, Sandymount Green. Right and left parallel, clanging, ringing, a double-decker and a single-deck moved from their railheads, swerved to the down line, glided parallel. Start, Palmerston Park. The wearer of the crown. Under the porch of the General Post Office, shoe blacks called and polished. Parked in North Prince Street, His Majesty's vermilion mail cars, bearing on their sides the royal initials E.R., received loudly flung sacks of letters, postcards, letter cards, parcels, insured and paid for local, provincial, British, and overseas delivery. Next, please.
Gentlemen of the press, gross-booted draymen rolled barrels, dull thudding, out of Prince's stores and bumped them up on the brewery float. On the brewery float, bumped dull-thudding barrels rolled by gross-booted draymen out of Prince's stores. There it is, Red Murray said. Alexander Keys. Just cut it out, will you, Mr. Bloom said, and I'll take it round to the telegraph office. The door of Rutledge's office creaked again. Davy Stevens, minute in a large cape coat, a small felt hat crowning his ringlets, passed out with a roll of papers under his cape, a King's courier. Red Murray's long shears sliced out the advertisement from the newspaper in 4 clean strokes, scissors and paste. I'll go through the printing works, Mr. Bloom said, taking the cut square. Of course, if he wants a pair, Red Murray said earnestly, a pen behind his ear. We can do him one. Right, Mr. Bloom said with a nod. I'll rub that in. We. William Braden, Esquire of Oakland's Sandymount. Red Murray touched Mr. Bloom's arm with the shears and whispered, Braden. Mr. Bloom turned and saw the liveried porter raise his lettered cap as a stately figure entered between the newsboards of the Weekly Freeman and National Press and the Freeman's Journal and National Press. Dull thudding Guinness's barrels. It passed stately up the staircase, steered by an umbrella, a solemn beard-framed face. The broadcloth back ascended each step back. All his brains are in the nape of his neck, Simon Dedalus says. Welts of flesh behind on him. Fat folds of neck. Fat neck. Fat neck. Next, please.
Don't you think his face is like our Savior? Ed Murray whispered. The door of Rutledge's office whispered, Cree. They always build one door opposite another for the wind to way in, way out. Our Savior, beard-framed oval face, talking in the dusk, Mary, Martha, steered by an umbrella soared to the footlights. Mario the tenor, or like Mario, Mr. Bloom said. Yes, Red Murray agreed, but Mario was said to be the picture of our Savior. Jesus Mario with rugy cheeks, doublet and spindle legs, hand on his heart. In Martha, come thou lost one, come thou dear one. Crozier and the pen. His Grace phoned down twice this morning, Red Murray said gravely. They watched the knees, legs, boots vanish, neck. The telegram boy stepped in nimbly, threw an envelope on the counter and stepped off post-haste with a word, free man. Mr. Bloom said slowly, well, he is one of our saviors also. A meek smile accompanied him as he lifted the counter. as he passed in through the side door, and along the warm, dark stairs and passage, along the now reverberating boards. But will he save the circulation? Thumping, thumping. He pushed in the glass swing door and entered, stepping over strewn packing paper. Through a lane of clanking drums, he made his way towards Nanetti's reading closet. With unfeigned regret, we announce the dissolution of a most respected Dublin Burgess. Hines here too, count of the funeral probably. Thumping, thump. This morning, the remains of the late Mr. Patrick Dignam. Machines. Smash a man to atoms if they got him caught. Rule the world today. These machineries are pegging away too. Like these, got out of hand, fermenting. Working away, tearing away, and that old grey rat tearing to get in. Next, please.
How a great deal. Oh, sorry. Who's reading? Am I reading? Yeah. Okay. How a great daily organ is turned out. Mr. Bloom halted behind the foreman's spare body, admiring a glossy crown. Strange he never saw his real country. Ireland, my country. Member for College Green. He boomed that workaday worker tack for all it was worth. It's the ads and side features sell a weekly, not the stale news in the official gazette. Queen Anne is dead. Published by authority in the year 1000 and domain situate at the townland of Rosenallis, barony of Tinnahinch. To all whom it may concern, schedule pursuant to statute showing return of number of mules and jennets exported from Ballina. Nature notes, cartoons, Phil Blake's Weekly, Pat and Bull Story, Uncle Toby's Page for Tiny Tots, Country Bumpkin's Queries. Dear Mr. Editor, what is a good cure for flatulence? I'd like that part. Learn a lot of teaching others. The personal note, MAP, mainly all pictures. Shapely bathers on Golden Strand, world's biggest balloon, double marriage of sisters celebrated, two bridegrooms laughing heartily at each other, Cuprani too, printer, more Irish than the Irish. The machines clanked in 3-4 time, thump, thump, thump. Now, if he got paralyzed there and no one knew how to stop them, they'd clank on and on the same, printed over and over and up and back. Monkey doodle the whole thing. Want a cool head. Well, get it into the evening edition, Councillor, Hines said. Soon be calling him my Lord Mayor. Long John is backing him, they say. Next, please.
Man, without answering, scribbled press on a corner of the sheet and made a sign to a typesetter. He handed the sheet silently over the dirty glass screen. Right, thanks, Hines said, moving off. Mr. Bloom stood in his way. If you want to draw, the cashier is just going to lunch, he said, pointing backward with his thumb. Did you? Hines asked. Mr. Bloom said. Look sharp and you'll catch him. Thanks, old man, Hines said. I'll tap him too. He hurried on eagerly towards the Freeman's Journal. 3 bob I lent him in Mars. 3 weeks. Third hint. Anne.
We see the canvasser at home. Mr. Bloom laid his cutting on Mr. Nanetti's desk. Excuse me, Council, he said. This ad, you see, keys, you remember? Mr. Nanetti considered the cutting a while and nodded. He wants it in for July, Mr. Bloom said. He doesn't hear it, Nanan, iron nerves. The foreman moved his pencil towards it. But wait, Mr. Bloom said. He wants it changed. Keys, you see. He wants 2 keys at the top. Hell of a racket they make. Maybe he understands what I... The foreman turned round to hear patiently, and lifting an eyebrow, began to scratch slowly in the armpit of his alpaca jacket. Like that, Mr. Bloom said, crossing his 4 fingers at the top. Let him take that in first. Mr. Bloom, glancing sideways up from the cross he has made, saw the foreman's sallow face. think he has a touch of jaundice, and beyond the obedient reels feeding in huge webs of paper. Clank it, miles of it, unreeled. What becomes of it after? Oh, wrap up meat parcels, various uses, 1,001 things. Slipping his words deftly into the pulses of the clanking, he drew swiftly on the scarred woodwork. Next, please.
House.
Sylvia.
Okay. House of keys. Like that. See, 2 cross keys here, a circle. Then hear the name, Alexander Keys, tea, wine, and spirit merchant, so on. Better not teach him his own business. You know yourself, counsellor, just what he wants. Then round the top and let it, the House of Keys. You see? Do you think that's a good idea? The foreman moved forward, scratching his hand to his lower ribs and scratched there quietly. The idea, Bloom said, is the House of Keys. You know, counsellor, the Manx Parliament, innuendo of Home Rule. Tourists, you know, from the Isle of Man. Catches the eye, you see. Can you do that? I could ask him, perhaps, about how to pronounce that volio. But then, if he didn't know, only make it awkward for him. I better not. We can do that, the foreman said. Have you a design? I can get it, Bloom said. It was in the Kilkenny paper. He has a house there too. I'll run out and ask him. Well, you can do that. And just a little power calling to attention. You know the usual? High-class licensed premises, long felt want, so on. The foreman thought for an instant. We can do that, he said. Let him give us 3 months renewal. A typesetter brought him a limp galley page. He began to check it silently. Mr. Bloom stood by, hearing the loud throbs of cranks, watching the silent typesetters at their cases. Orthographical. Want to be sure of his spelling. Proof fever. Martin Comingham forgot to give us his spelling bee conundrum this morning. It's amusing to view on power one or allied, embara, 2 R's, is it? Doubt S meant of harassed peddler while gorging the cemetery with a eye of a peeled pear under the cemetery wall. Silly, isn't it? Cemetery put in, of course, on account of the symmetry. Next.
I could have said when he clapped on his topper, thank you. I ought to have said something about an old hat or something. No, I could have said, looks as good as new now. See his fizz then. Tilt. The nethermost deck of the first machine jogged forward, its flyboard with silt. The first batch of wire-folded papers. Silt. Almost human the way it silt to call attention, doing its level best to speak. That door too silt, creaking, asking to be shut. Everything speaks in its own way. Silt. Noted churchman, an occasional contributor. The foreman handed back the galley page suddenly, saying, wait, where's the Archbishop's letter? It's to be repeated in the Telegraph. Where is what's his name? He looked about him round his loud, unanswering machines. Monk, sir? A voice asked from the casting box. Aye, where's Monks? Monks? Mr. Bloom took up his cutting. Time to get out. Then I'll get the design, Mr. Nanetti, he said, and you'll give it a good place, I know. Monks? Yes, sir. 3 months renewal. Want to get some wind off my chest first. Try it anyhow. Rub in August. Good idea. Horse show month. Falls Bridge. Tourists over for the show. Next, please.
A day father. He walked on through the case room, passing an old man, bowed, spectacled, aproned. Old monks, the day father. Queer lot of stuff he must have put through his hands in his time. Obituary notices, pubs ads, speeches, divorce suits, found drowned. Nearing the end of his tether now. Sober, serious man with a bit in the savings bank, I'd say. Wife a good cook and washer, daughter working the machine in the parlor. Plain Jane, no damn nonsense. And it was the feast of the Passover. He stayed in his walk to catch typesetter neatly distributing type. Reads it backwards first. Quickly, he does it. Must require some practice that. Manji di Kasiratapi, poor Papa with his Haggadah book, reading backwards with his finger to me. Pesach, next year in Jerusalem, dear, oh dear, all that long business about that brought us out of the land of Egypt and into the house of bondage. Alleluia. Shema Israel. Adonai Elohenu. No, that's the other. Then the 12 brothers, Jacob's sons, and then the lamb and the cat and the dog and the stick and the water and the butcher. And then the angel of death kills the butcher and he kills the ox and the dog kills the cat. Sounds a bit silly till you come to look into it well. Justice it means, but it's everybody eating everybody else. That's what life is, after all. How quickly he does that job. Practice makes perfect. Seems to see with his fingers. Mr. Bloom passed on out of the clanking noises through the gallery onto the landing. Now am I going to tram it all the way and then catch him out, perhaps? Best phone him up first. Number? Yes. Same as Citron's house. 2844. Next.
Only once more that soap. He went down the house staircase. Who the deuce scrawled all over these walls with matches? Looks as if they did it for a bet. Heavy greasy smell there always is in those works. Lukewarm glue in thumbs next door when I was there. He took out his handkerchief to dab his nose. Citron lemon. Ah, the soap I put there. Lose it out of that pocket. Putting back his handkerchief, he took out the soap and stowed it away, buttoned into the hip pocket of his trousers. What perfume does your wife use? I could go home still. Tram, something I forgot. Just to see before dressing. No, here, no. A sudden screech of laughter came from the Evening Telegraph office. Know who that is. What's up? Pop in a minute to phone. Ned Lambert it is. He entered softly. Airing green gem of the Silver Sea. The ghost works, Professor McHugh murmured softly, biscuit-free to the dusty window pane. Mr. Dedalus, staring from the empty fireplace at Ned Lambert's quizzing face, asked of it sourly. Agonizing Christ, wouldn't it give you a heartburn on your arse? Ned Lambert, seated on the table, read on. Oh, again, note the manderings of some purring rill as it bubbles on its way, fanned by gentlest zephyrs, so quarreling with the stony obstacles, to the tumbling waters of Neptune's blue domain, mid mossy banks, played on by the glorious sunlight, One is the shadows cast o'er its pensive bosom by the overarching leafage of the giants of the forest. What about that, Simon? He asked over the fringe of his newspaper. How's that for high? Changing his drink, Mr. Dider said. Next, please.
Ned Lambert, laughing, struck the newspaper on his knee, repeating, "The pensive bosom and the overarching leafage, oh boys, And Xenophon looked upon Marathon, Mr. Daedalus said, looking again on the fireplace and to the window, and Marathon looked on the sea. That will do, Professor McHugh cried from the window. I don't want to hear any more of that stuff. He ate off the crescent of water biscuit he had been nibbling and hungered, made ready to nibble the biscuit in his other hand. Highfalutin stuff, blather bags. Ned Lambert is taking a day off, I see. Rather upsets a man's day, a funeral does. He has influence, they say. Old Chatterton of the Vice-Chancellor is his granduncle or his great-granduncle. Close on 90, they say. Sub-leader for his death written a long time perhaps, living to spite them. Might go first himself. Johnny, make room for your uncle, the Right Honourable Hedges Erie Chatterton. Dare say he writes him an odd shaky check or two on gale days. Windfall when he kicks out. Hallelujah. Well, just another spasm, Ned Lambert said. What is it, Mr. Bloom asked. A recently discovered fragment of Cicero's, Professor McHugh answered, with pomp of tone. Our lovely land. Short, but to the point. Whose land, Mr. Bloom said simply. Most pertinent question, the professor said between his chews, with an accent on the whose. Dan Dawson's land, Mr. Daedalus said. Is it his speech last night, Mr. Bloom asked. Ned Lambert nodded. But listen to this, he said. The doorknob hit Mr. Bloom at the small of the back as the door was pushed in. Excuse me, J.J. Malloy said, entering. Mr. Bloom moved nimbly aside. I beg yours, he said. Good day, Jack. Come in. Good day. How are you, Daedalus? Well, and yourself? J.J. Malloy shook his head. Cleverest fellow at the junior bar he used to be. Decline, poor chap. That hectic flush spells finis for a man. Touch and go with him. What's in the wind, I wonder? Money worry? Next, please.
Or again, if we but climb the serried mountain peaks. You're looking extra. Is the editor to be seen? J.J. O'Malloy asked, looking toward the inner door. Very much so, Professor McHugh said. To be seen and heard. He's in his sanctum with Lenehan. J.J. O'Malloy strolled to the sloping desk and began to turn back the pink pages of the file. Practice dwindling. A might have been. Losing heart. Gambling. Debts of honor. Reaping the whirlwind. Used to get good retainers from D and T Fitzgerald. Their wigs to show the grey matter. Brains on their sleeve like the statue in Glasnevin. Believe he does some literary work for the Express with Gabriel Conroy. Well-read fellow. Miles Crawford began on the Independent. Funny the way those newspaper men veer about when they get wind of a new opening. Weathercocks. Hot and cold in the same breath. Wouldn't know which to believe. One good story, till you hear the next. Go for one another bald-headed in the papers, and then all blows over. Hail fellow well met the next moment. Listen to this for God's sake, Ned Lambert pleaded. Or again, if we but climb the serried mountain peaks. Bombast, the professor broke in testily. Enough of the inflated windbag. Peaks, Ned Lambert went on, towering on high, to bathe our souls, as it were. Bathe his lips, Mr. Daedalus said. Blessed and eternal God. Yes, is he taking anything for it? As 'twere in the peerless panorama of Ireland's portfolio, unmatched, despite their well-praised prototypes, in other vaunted prize regions, for very beauty, a bosky grove, an undulating plain, and luscious pasture land of vernal green, steeped in the transcendent, translucent glow of our mild, mysterious Irish twilight. The moon, Professor McHugh said. He forgot Hamlet, his native Doric, that mantles the vista far and wide, and wait till the glowing orb of the moon shine forth to irradiate her silver of effulgence. Oh, Mr. Dedalus cried, giving vent to a hopeless groan. Shite and onions! That'll do, Ned. Life is too short. He took off his silk hat, and blowing out impatiently his bushy mustache, Welsh combed his hair with raking fingers. Ned Lambert tossed the newspaper aside, chuckling with delight. An instant after, a hoarse bark of laughter burst over Professor McHugh's unshaven, bespectacled face. Dotty-daw, he cried. Duncan?
What Weatherup said. All very fine to jeer at it now in cold print, but it goes down like hotcake, that stuff. He was in the bakery line too, wasn't he? Why did they call him Doughy-da? Feathered his nest well, anyhow. Daughter engaged to that chap in the Inland Revenue Office with the motor. Hook that nicely. Entertainment's open house, big blowout. Weatherup always said that. Get a grip on them by the stomach. The inner door was opened violently, and a scarlet-beaked face, crested by a comb of feathery hair, thrust itself in. The bold blue eyes stared about them, and the harsh voice asked, "What is it?" "And here comes the sham squire himself," Professor McHugh said grandly. "Get out that, you bloody old pedagogue," the editor said in recognition. "Come, Ned," Mr. Dedalus said, putting on his hat. "I must get a drink after that." "Drink!" the editor cried. "No drink served before Mass." "Quite right, too," Mr. Dedalus said, going out. "Come on, Ned." Ned Lambert sidled down from the table. The editor's blue eyes roved towards Mr. Bloom's face, shadowed by a smile. "Will you join us, Miles?" Ned Lambert asked. Memorable battles recalled. "North Cork Militia!" the editor cried, striding to the mantelpiece. "We won every time. North Cork and Spanish officers." Where was that, Miles?" Ned Lambert asked with a reflective glance at his toe caps. "In Ohio." "So it was, begad," Ned Lambert agreed. Passing out, he whispered to J.J. O'Malloy, "Incipient jigs, sad case." "Ohio!" the editor crowed in high treble from his uplifted scarlet face. "My Ohio!" "A perfect critic," the professor said. "Long, short, and long. O harp Aeolian." He took a reel of dental floss from his waistcoat pocket, and breaking off a piece, twanged it smartly between 2 and 2 of his resonant, unwashed teeth. Bing bang, bang bang. Mr. Bloom, seeing the coast clear, made for the inner door. "Just a moment, Mr. Crawford," he said. "I want to phone about an ad." He went in. "What about the leader this evening?" Professor McHugh asked, coming to the editor and laying a firm hand on his shoulder. That'll be all right," Miles Crawford said more calmly. "Never you fret. Hello, Jack. That's all right." "Good day, Miles," J.J. O'Malloy said, letting the pages he held slip limply back into the file. "Is that Canada swindle case on today?" The telephone whirred inside. 28? No, 20. 44? Yes. Next.
Spot the winner. Lenehan came out of the inner office with sports tissues. "Who wants a dead cert for the Gold Cup?" he asked. Scepter with "O Madden" up. He tossed the tissues onto the table. Screams of newsboys barefoot in the hall rushed near, and the door was flung open. "Hush," Lenehan said. "I hear feet, Stoops." Professor McHugh strode across the room and seized the cringing urchin by the collar as the others scampered out of the hall and down the steps. The tissues rustled up in the draft, floated softly in the air, blue scrawls, and under the table came to earth. Wasn't me, sir. It was the big fellow shoved me, sir. Throw him out and shut the door, the editor said. There's a hurricane blowing. Lenehan began to paw the tissues up from the floor, grunting as he stooped twice. Waiting for the racing special, sir, the newsboy said. It was Pat Farrell shoved me, sir. He pointed to two faces peering in round the door frame. Him, sir. Out of this with you, Professor McHugh said gruffly. He hustled the boy out and banged the door to. J.J. O'Malloy turned the files cracklingly over, murmuring, seeking. Continued on page 6, column 4. Yes. Evening Telegraph here. Mr. Bloom phoned from the inner office. Is the boss? Yes. Telegraph. To where? Aha. Which auction room? Aha. I see. Right. I'll catch him. A collision ensues. The bell whirred again as he rang off. He came in quickly and bumped against Lenehan, who was struggling up with a second tissue. Pardon, monsieur, Lenehan said, clutching him for an instant and making a grimace. My fault, Mr. Bloom said, suffering his grip. Are you hurt? I'm in a hurry. Knee, Lenehan said. He made a comic face and whined, rubbing his knee. The accumulation of the Anno Domini. Sorry, Mr. Bloom said. Next, please.
He went to the door and, holding it ajar, paused. J.J. O'Malloy slapped the heavy pages over. The noise of two shrill voices, a mouth organ, echoed in the bare hallway from the newsboys squatted on the doorsteps. We are the boys of Wexford who fought with heart and hand. Exit Bloom. I'm just running around to Bachelor's Walk, Mr. Bloom said. About this ad of Keys. Want to fix it up. They tell me he's round there in Dillon's. He looked indecisively for a moment at their faces. The editor, who leaning against the mantel shelf, had propped his head on his hand, suddenly stretched forth an arm amply. Begone, he said. The world is before you. Back in no time, Mr. Bloom said, hurrying out. J.J. O'Malloy took the tissues from Lenehan's hand and read them, blowing them apart gently without comment. You'll get that advertisement, the professor said, staring through his black rimmed spectacles over the cross blind. Look at the young scamps after him. Show. Where? Lenehan cried, running to the window. The street cortege. Both smiled over the cross blind at the file of capering newsboys in Mr. Bloom's wake. The last zigzagging white on the breeze, a mocking kite, a tail of white bowknots. Look at that young gutter snipe behind him, hue and cry, Lenehan said. And you'll kick. Oh, my rib, Risible. Taking off his flat spogs and the walk. Small nines, steel upon lark. He began to mazurka in swift caricature across the floor on sliding feet past the fireplace to J.J. O'Malloy, who placed the tissues in his receiving hands. What's that? Miles Crawford said with a start. Where are the other two gone? Who? The professor said, turning. They're gone around to the Oval for a drink. Paddy Hooper is there with Jack Hall. Came over last night. Come on then, Miles Crawford said. Where's my hat? He walked jerkily into the office behind, parting the vent of his jacket, jingling his keys in his back pocket. They jingled then in the air and against the wood as he locked his desk drawer. Pretty well on, Professor McHugh said in a low voice. Seems to be, J.J. O'Malloy said, taking out a cigarette case in murmuring meditation. But it is not always as it seems. Who has the most matches? Next, please.
The Calumet of Peace. He offered a cigarette to the professor and took one himself. Lenehan promptly struck a match for them and lit their cigarettes in turn. J.J. O'Malloy opened his case again and offered it. Thank you, Vooz, Lenehan said, helping himself. The editor came from the inner office, a straw hat awry on his brow. He declaimed in song, pointing sternly at Professor McHugh. 'Twas rank and fame that tempted thee, 'twas empire charmed thy heart. The professor grinned, locking his long lips. You bloody old Roman Empire, Miles Crawford said. He took a cigarette from the open case. Lenehan, lighting it for him with quick grace, said, "Silence for my brand new riddle." Imperium Romanum, J.J. O'Malloy said gently. It sounds nobler than the British or Brixton. The word reminds one somehow of fat in the fire. Miles Crawford blew his first puff violently towards the ceiling. "That's it," he said. "We are the fat. You and I are the fat in the fire. We haven't got a chance of a snowball in hell." Next, please.
The grandeur that was Rome. Wait a minute, Professor McHugh said, raising two quiet claws. We mustn't be led away by words, by sounds of words. We think of Rome, imperial, imperious, imperative. He extended elocutionary arms from frayed, stained shirt cuffs, pausing. What was their civilization? Vast, I allow, but vile, cloacae, sewers. The Jews in the wilderness and on the mountain top said, "It is meet to be here. Let us build an altar to Jehovah." The Roman, like the Englishman who follows in his footsteps, brought to every new shore on which he set his foot, on our shore he never set it, only his clerical obsession. He gazed about him in his toga and said, "It is meet to be here. Let us construct a water closet." Which they accordingly did do, Lenehan said. Our old ancient ancestors, as we read in the first chapter of Guinness's, were partial to the running stream. They were nature's gentlemen, J.J. O'Malloy murmured. But we have also Roman law, and Pontius Pilate is its prophet, Professor McHugh responded. Do you know that story about Chief Barnpales? J.J. O'Malloy asked. It was at the Royal University dinner. Everything was going swimmingly. First, my riddle, Lenehan said. Are you ready? O'Madden Burke, tall and copious, grey of Donegal tweed, came in from the hallway. Stephen Dedalus behind him, uncovered as he entered. Entrez, mes enfants, Lenehan cried. I escort a suppliant, Mr. O'Madden Burke said melodiously. Youth, led by experience, visits notoriety. How do you do? The editor said, holding out a hand. Come in. Your governor's just gone. And
Question mark, question mark, question mark. Lenehan said to all, silence. What opera resembles a railway line? Reflect, ponder, exculpate, reply. Stephen handed over the typed sheets pointing to the title and signature. Who? The editor asked. Bit torn off. Mr. Garrett Deasy, Stephen said. That old Pelters, the editor said. Who tore it? Was he taken short? On swift sail flaming from storm and south, he comes, pale vampire, mouth to my mouth. Good day, Stephen, the professor said, coming to peer over their shoulders, foot and mouth, and returned, Bullock befriending Bard. Shindy and well-known restaurant. Good day, sir, Stephen answered, blushing. The letter is not mine. Mr. Garrett Deasy asked me to. Oh, I know him, Miles Crawford said. I knew his wife, too, the bloodiest old tart godder ever made. By Jesus, she had the foot and mouth disease and no mistake. The night she threw the soup in the waiter's face in the Star and Garter. Oh. A woman brought sin into the world, for Helen, the runaway wife of Menelaus, 10 years the Greeks. O'Rourke, Prince of Breffni. Is he a widower? Stephen asked. Aye, a grass one, Miles Crawford said, his eye running down the typescript. Emperor's horses. Habsburg. An Irishman saved his life on the ramparts of Vienna. Don't you forget. Maximilian Carl O'Donnell, Graf von Tyrconnell in Ireland. Sent his heir over to make the king an Australian field marshal now. Going to be trouble there one day. Wild geese. Oh yes, every time. Don't you forget that. The moot point is, did he forget it? J.J. Malloy said quietly, turning a horseshoe paperweight. Saving princes is a thank you job. Professor McHughes turned on him. And if not, he said, I'll tell you how it was my Crawford began. Hungarian it was one day. Next, please. That's you, Sylvia. You're on mute. Sylvia.
Mhm. Yep, good.
Lost causes. Noble Marquess men. Oh, sorry. Noble Marquess mentioned. We were always loyal to lost causes, the professor said. Success for us is the death of the intellect and of the imagination. We were never loyal to the successful. We serve them. I teach the blatant Latin language. I speak the tongue of a race, the acme of whose mentality is the maxim. Time is money. Material domination, dominus. Lord, where is the spirituality? Lord Jesus? Lord Salisbury? A sofa in the West End Club, but the Greek? Kyrie eleison. A smile of light brightened his dark-rimmed eyes, lengthened his long lips. The Greek, he said again, Kyrios, shining word. The vowels, the Semite and the Saxon know not. Kyrie, the radiance of the intellect. I ought to profess Greek, the language of the mind. Kyrie eleison, the closet maker and the clo maker will never be lords of our spirit. We are liege subjects of the Catholic chivalry of Europe that foundered at Trafalgar and of the empire of the spirit, not an imperium that went under with the Athenian fleet at Aegos Potania. Yes, they went under. Pyrrhus, misled by an oracle, made the last attempt to retrieve the fortunes of Greece, loyal to a lost cause. He strode away from them towards the window. They went forth to battle, Mr. O'Madden Burke says greyly, but they always fell. Boo-hoo. Lenihan wept with a little noise, owing to a brick received in the latter half of the matinee. Poor Pyrrhus. He whispered then near Stephen's ear. Next.
Lenihan's Limerick. There's a ponderous pundit MacHugh who wears goggles of ebony hue. As he mostly sees double, to wear them, why trouble? I can't see the Joe Miller, can you? In mourning for solace, Mulligan says, whose mother is beastly dead. Miles Crawford crammed the sheets into a side pocket. That'll be all right, he said. I'll read the rest after. That'll be all right. Lenihan extended his hands in protest. But my riddle, he said. What opera is like a railway line? Opera? Mr. O'Madden Burke's sphinx face re-riddled. Lenihan announced gladly. The Rose of Castile. See the wheeze. Rose of Castile. G. He poked Mr. O'Madden Burke mildly in the spleen. Mr. O'Madden Burke fell back with grace on his umbrella, feigning a gasp. Help, he sighed. I feel a strong weakness. Lenihan, rising to tiptoe, fanned his face rapidly with the rustling tissue. The professor, returning by way of the files, swept his hand across Stephen's and Mr. O'Madden Burke's loose ties. Paris, past and present, he said. You look like communards, like fellows who had blown up the Bastille, J.J. O'Malloy said in quiet mockery. Or was it you shot the Lord Lieutenant of Finland between you? You look as though you had done the deed, General Obrikov. Next, please.
Omnium gatherum. We were only thinking about it, Stephen said. All the talents, Miles Crawford said. Law, the classics. The turf, Lenehan put in. Literature, the press. If Bloom were here, the professor said, the gentle art of advertisement. And Madame Bloom, Mr. O'Madden Burke added, the vocal muse, Dublin's prime favorite. Lenehan gave a loud cough. And he said very softly, oh, for a breath of fresh air. I caught a cold in the park. The gate was open. You can do it. The editor laid a nervous hand on Stephen's shoulder. I want you to write something for me, he said. Something with a bite in it. You can do it. I see it in your face, in the lexicon of youth. See it in your face. See it in your eye. Lazy, idle little schemer. Foot and mouth disease, the editor cried in scornful invective. Great nationalist meeting in Boris and Ossory? All balls. Bulldozing the public. Give them something with a bite in it. Put us all into it, damn it, soul. Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, and Jakes McCarthy. We can all supply mental pabulum, Mr. O'Madden Burke said. Stephen raised his eyes to the bold, unheeding stare. He wants you for the press gang, J.J. O'Malloy said. The great Gallagher. You could do it, Miles Crawford repeated, clenching his hand in emphasis. Wait a minute. We'll paralyze Europe, as Ignatius Gallagher used to say when he was on the Chaperon doing billiard marking in the Clarence. Gallagher, that was a pressman for you. That was a pen. You know how he made his mark? I'll tell you, that was the smartest piece of journalism ever known. That was in 81, 6th of May, time of the Invincibles. Murder in the Phoenix Park before you were born, I suppose. I'll show you. He pushed past them to the files. Look at here, he said, turning. The New York World cabled for a special. Remember that time? Professor McHugh nodded. New York World, the editor said, excitedly pushing back his straw hat. Where it took place, Tim Kelly, or Kavanaugh, Joe Brady, and the rest of them, where Skin the Goat drove the car, whole route, see? Skin the Goat, Mr. O'Madden Burke said. Fitzharris, he has that cabman's shelter, they say, down there at Butt Bridge. Holohan told me. You know Holohan? Hop and carry one, is it? Miles Crawford said. And poor Gumley is down there too, so he told me, minding stones for the corporation, a night watchman. Stephen turned in surprise. Gumley, he said, you don't say so. A friend of my father's, is it? Never mind Gumley, Miles Crawford cried angrily. Let Gumley mind the stones. See they don't run away. Look at here. What did Ignatius Gallagher do? I'll tell you. Inspiration of genius. Cabled right away. Have you Weekly Freeman of 17 March? Right. Have you got that? He flung back pages of the files and stuck his fingers on a point. Take page 4, advertisement for Bransom's Coffee, let us say. Have you got that? Right. The telephone word. Next, please.
A distant voice. I'll answer it, the professor said, going. B is Parkgate good. His finger leaped and struck point after point, vibrating. T is Viceregal Lodge. C is where murder took place. K is Knockmaroon Gate. The loose flesh of his neck shook like a cock's wattles, and in starched, Dicky jutted up, and with a rude gesture, he thrust it back into his waistcoat. Hello, Evening Telegraph. Hello, here. Hello, who's there? Yes, yes, yes. F2P is the route Skin the Goat drove the car for an alibi. Inchcore, Round Town, Windy Arbor, Palmerston Park, Lanara, FABP got that, exits David's public house in Upper Leeson Street. The professor came to the inner door. Bloom is at the telephone, he said. Tell him go to hell, the editor said promptly. Exit Barks' public house. See? Clever, very. Clever, Lenihan said, very. Gave it to them on a hot plate. Miles Crawford said, the whole bloody history, nightmare from which you will never awake. I saw it, the editor said proudly. I was present, Dick Adams, the best-hearted bloody corkman the Lord ever put the breath of life in, and myself. Lenihan bowed to a shape of air, announcing, Madame, I'm Madame, and Abel was I was Elva. History, Miles Crawford cried. The old woman of Princess Street was there first. There was weeping and gnashing of teeth over that, out of an advertisement. Gregor Gray made the design for it that gave him the leg up. Then Paddy Hooper worked Taipei, who took him onto the star. Now he's got in with Blumenfeld. That's press. That's talent. Part. He was all their daddies. The father of scare journalism, Lenihan confirmed, and the brother-in-law of Chris Carrinan. Hello, are you there? Yes, he's here still. Come across yourself. Where do you find a pressman like that now, huh? The editor cried. He flung the pages down. Clam Deeper, Lenihan said to Mr. Madan Burke. Very smart, Mr. Madan Burke said. Professor McHugh came from the inner office. Talking about Invincible, he said, did you see that some hawkers were up before the recorder? Next, please.
Oh, yes, J.J. O'Malley said eagerly. Lady Dudley was walking home through the park to see all the trees that were blown down by that cyclone last year and thought she'd buy a view of Dublin. And it turned out to be a commemoration postcard of Joe Brady on number 1 or Skin the Goat, right outside the Viceregal Lodge. Imagine. They're only in the hook and eye department, Miles Crawford said. Psh, press in the bar. What have you a men now at the bar, like those fellows, like Whiteside, like Isaac Butt, like Silver-tongued O'Hagan, eh? Bloody nonsense. Only in the halfpenny place. His mouth continued to twitch, unspeaking in nervous curls of disdain. Would anyone wish that mouth for her kiss? How do you know? Why did you write it then? Rhymes and reason. Mouth south. Is the mouth south somewhere? Or the south a mouth? Must be some. South, pout, out, shout, drought. Rhymes. 2 men dressed the same, looking the same. 2 by 2. Let 2 apace. C'est par leur place. Mentre il vento compacite. He saw them 3 by 3 approaching girls in green, in rose, in russet, entwining, perles perso, in mauve, in purple, quella pacifica, oriflamme, in gold or oriflame, the rimiver the pew ardenti, but I, old man, pertinent, leaden-footed, under dark neath the night, mouth, south, tomb, womb. Speak up yourself, Mr. O'Madden, Burke said. Sufficient for the day. J.J. O'Malloy, smiling palely, took up the gauge. My dear Miles, he said, flinging his cigarette aside, you put a false construction on my words. I hold no brief, as at present advised, for the third profession, K profession, but your cork legs are running away with you. Why not bring in Henry Grattan and Flood and Demosthenes and Edmund Burke, Ignatius Gallagher, we all know, and his chapel lizard boss Harmsworth of the Farthing Press, and his American cousin of the Bowery Gutter Sheet, not to mention Paddy Kelly's budget pay occurrence, and our watchful friend, the Skibbereen Eagle. Why bring in a master of forensic eloquence like Whiteside? Sufficient for today is a newspaper thereof. Links the bygone days of yore. Grattan and Flood wrote for this very paper, the editor cried in his last face. In his face. Irish volunteers, where are you now? Established 1763. Dr. Lucas, who have you now like John Philpott Curran? Ha! Well, J.J. Malloy said. Bush, KC, for example. Bush, the editor said. Well, yes, Bush, yes. He has a strain of it in his blood. Kendall Bush, or I mean Seymour Bush. He would have been on the bench long ago, the professor said, only for... but no matter. J.J. Malloy turned to Stephen and said quietly and slowly, one of the most polished periods, I think, I ever listened to in my life fell from the lips of Seymour Bush. It was in that case of fratricide, the child's murder case. Bush defended him. And in the portraits of mine ear did pour. By the way, how did he find that out? He died in his sleep. Or the other story, beast with two backs. What was that? The professor asked. Next, please.
Italia magistra artium. He spoke on the law of evidence, J.J. O'Malloy said, of Roman justice as contrasted with the earlier Mosaic Code, the Lex Talionis. And he cited the Moses of Michelangelo in the Vatican. Ha! A few well-chosen words, Lanahan prefaced. Silence. Pause. J.J. O'Malloy took out his cigarette case. False law. Something quite ordinary. Messenger took out his matchbox thoughtfully and lit his cigar. I have often thought, since looking back over that strange time, that it was that small act, trivial in itself, that striking of that match, that determined the whole aftercourse of both of our lives. Polished period. J.J. O'Malloy resumed, molding his words. He said of it, that stony effigy in frozen music, horned and terrible, of the human form divine, that eternal symbol of wisdom and of prophecy which, if aught that the imagination or hand of sculpture has wrought in marble, or soul transfigured, and of soul transfiguring deserves to live. A slim hand with a wave graced echo and fall. Fine, Miles Crawford said at once. The divine afflatus, Mr. O'Madden, Burke said. You like it? J.J. O'Malloy asked Stephen. Stephen, his blood wooed by grace of language and gesture, blushed. He took a cigarette from the case. J.J. O'Malloy offered his case to Miles Crawford. Lanahan lit their cigarettes as before and took his trophy, saying, Much of us, thank of us. A man of high morale. Professor McGinnis was speaking to me about you, J.J. O'Malloy said to Stephen. What do you really think of that hermetic crowd? The opal hush poets, A.E., the master mystic. That Blavatsky woman started it. She was a nice bag of tricks. A.E. has been telling some Yankee interviewer that you came to him in the small hours of the morning to ask him about planes of consciousness. McGinnis thinks you must have been pulling A.E.'s leg. He's a man of the very highest morale, McGinnis. Speaking about me, what did he say? What did he say? What did he say about me? Don't ask. No thanks, Professor McHugh said, waving the cigarette case aside. Wait a moment. Let me say one thing. The finest display of oratory I ever heard was a speech made by John F. Taylor at the College Historical Society. Mr. Justice Fitzgibbon, the present Lord Justice of Appeal, had spoken, and the paper under debate was an essay, new for those days, advocating the revival of the Irish tongue. He turned towards Mild Crawford and said, "You know Gerald Fitzgibbon. Then you can imagine the style of his discourse. He's sitting with Tim Healy," J.J. O'Molloy said, rumor has it, "on the Trinity College Estates Commission." He's sitting with a sweet thing, Miles Crawford said in a child's frock. Go on, well? It was the speech, mark you, the professor said, of a finished orator, full of courteous haughtiness and pouring in chastened diction, I will not say the vials of his wrath, but pouring the proud man's contumely upon the new movement. It was then a new movement. We were weak, therefore worthless. He closed his long, thin lips an instant, but, eager to be on, raised an outspanned hand to his spectacles, and, with trembling thumb and forefinger touching lightly on the black rims, steadied them to a new focus. Duncan?
Impromptu. In ferial tone, he addressed J.J. O'Molloy. Taylor had come here, you know, from a sick bed. That he had prepared a speech, I do not believe, for there was not even one shorthand writer in the hall. His dark, lean face had the growth of shaggy beard round it. He wore a loose neckcloth, and though he was not, a dying man. His gaze turned at once but slowly from J.J. O'Molloy's toward Stephen's face, and then bent at once to the ground, seeking. His unglazed linen collar appeared behind his bent head, soiled by his withering hair. Still seeking, he said. When Fitzgibbon's speech had ended, John F. Taylor rose to reply. Briefly, as well as I can bring them to mind, his words were these. He raised his head firmly. His eyes bethought themselves once more. Witless shellfish swam in the gross lenses, to and fro seeking outlet. He began. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, great was my admiration in listening to the remarks addressed to the youth of Ireland a moment since by my learned friend. It seemed to me that I had been transported into a country far away from this country, into an age remote from this age, that I stood in ancient Egypt, and that I was listening to the speech of some high priest of that land addressed to the youthful Moses. His listeners held their cigarettes poised to hear, their smokes ascending in frail stalks that flowered with his speech. And let our crooked smokes, noble words coming out, look out. Would you try your hand at it yourself? And it seemed to me that I heard the voice of that Egyptian high priest raised in a tone of haughtiness and like pride. I heard his words, and their meaning was revealed to me. Next, please.
From the fathers, it was revealed to me that those things are good which yet are corrupted, which neither if they were supremely good, nor unless they were good, could be corrupted. Ah, curse you, that's St. Augustine. Why will you Jews not accept our culture, our religion, and our language? You are a tribe of nomad herdsmen. We are a mighty people. You have no cities nor no wealth. Our cities are hives of humanity, and our galleys, trireme and quadrireme, laden with all manner merchandise, furrow the waters of the known globe. You have but emerged from a primitive condition. We have a literature, a priesthood, an age-long history, and a polity. Nile, child, man, effigy. By the Nile bank, the babe Maries kneel, cradle of bulrushes, a man supple in combat, stone-horned, stone-bearded, heart of stone. You pray to a local and obscure idol. Our temples, majestic and mysterious, are the abodes of Isis and Osiris, of Horus and Ammon-Ra. Yours, serfdom, awe, and humbleness. Ours, thunder in the seas. Israel is weak, and few are her children. Egypt is an host, and terrible are her arms. Vagrants and day laborers are you called. The world trembles at our name. A dumb belch of hunger cleft his speech. He lifted his voice above it boldly. But, ladies and gentlemen, had the youthful Moses listened to and accepted that view of life, had he bowed his head and bowed his will and bowed his spirit before that arrogant admonition, he would never have brought the chosen people out of their house of bondage, nor followed the pillar of the cloud by day. He would never have spoken with the eternal amid lightnings on Sinai's mountaintop, nor ever have come down with the light of inspiration shining in his countenance and bearing in his arms the tables of the law, graven in the language of the outlaw. He ceased and looked at them, enjoying silence. Next, please.
Ominous for him. J.J. O'Malloy said, not without regret, and yet he died without having entered the land of promise. Sudden at the moment, though from lingering illness, often previously expectorated demise, Hanahan said, and with a great future behind him. The troop of bare feet was heard rushing along the hallway and pattering up the staircase. That is oratory, the professor said, uncontradicted. Gone with the wind, hosts of Moloch Mast and Tara of the kings, miles of ears of porches, the tribune's words howled and scattered to the four winds, a people sheltered within his voice, dead noise, Akasic records of all that ever anywhere whatever was. Love and loathe him, me no more. I have money. Gentlemen, Stephen said, at the next motion of the agenda paper, may I suggest that the House do now adjourn? You take my breath away. It is not, perchance, a French compliment. Mr. O'Madden Burke asked. 'Tis the hour, methinks, when the wine jug, metaphorically speaking, is most grateful in ye ancient hostelry. That it be, and hereby is resolutely resolved. All who are in favour say aye, Lenehan announced. The contrary, no. I declare it carried. To which particular boozing shed? My casting vote is Mooney's. He led the way, admonishing, we will sternly refuse to partake of strong waters, will we not? Yes, we will not, by no manner of means. Mr. O'Madden Burke, following close, said with an ally's lunge of his umbrella, lay on Macduff. Chip off the old block, the editor cried, slapping Stephen on the shoulder. Let us go. Where are those blasted keys? He fumbled in his pocket, pulled out the crushed type sheets. Foot and mouth, I know. That'll be all right. That'll go in. Where are they? That's all right. He thrust the sheets back and went into the inner office. Let us hope. J.J. O'Malloy, about to follow him in, said quietly to Stephen, I hope you will live to see it published. Miles, one moment. He went into the inner office, closing the door behind him. Come along, Stephen, the professor said. This is fine, isn't it? It has the prophetic vision, Fuit Ilium, the sack of windy Troy, kingdoms of this world. The masters of the Mediterranean are fellaheen today. First newsboy came pattering down the stairs at their heels and rushed out into the street yelling, Racing Special! Dublin, I have much, much to learn. They turned to the left along Abbey Street. I have a vision too, Stephen said. Yes, the professor said, skipping into the step. Crawford will follow. Another newsboy shot past them, yelling as he ran, "Racing special." Next, please.
Are we going on?
Yes, we
Okay.
are going to go on. We've got about 4 more pages, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Dear Dirty Dublin, Dubliners, 2 Dublin Vestals, Stephen said, elderly and pious, have lived 50 and 53 years in Fumbleye's Lane. Where's that? The professor asked. Off Black Pits, Stephen said. Damp night reeking of hungry dough against the wall. Face glistening tallow under her fustian shawl. Frantic hearts. Akashic records. Quicker, darling. On now. Dare it. Let there be life. They want to see the views of Dublin from the top of Nelson's Pillar. They save up 3 and 10 pence in a red tin letterbox money box. They shake out the 3-penny bits and 6pence and coax out the pennies with the blade of a knife. 2 and 3 in silver and 1 and 7 in coppers. They put on their bonnets and best clothes and take their umbrellas for fear it may come on to rain. Wise virgins, Professor McHugh said. Life on the raw. They put 1 and 4pence worth of brawn and 4 slices of pan loaf at the North City dining rooms in Marlborough Street from Miss Kate Collins, proprietress. They purchased 4 and 20 ripe plums from a girl at the foot of Nelson's Pillar to take off the thirst of the brawn. They give 2 3-penny bits to the gentleman at the turnstile and begin to waddle slowly up the winding staircase, grunting, encouraging each other, afraid of the dark, panting, one asking the other, "Have you the brawn?" Praising God and the Blessed Virgin, threatening to come down, peeping at the air slits. Glory be to God. They had no idea it was that high. Next, please.
Their names are Anne Kearns and Florence McCabe. Anne Kearns has the lumbago, for which she rubs on Lourdes water, given her by a lady who got a bottle full from a passionate father. Florence McCabe takes a crubine and a bottle of double X for supper every Saturday. Antithesis, the professor said, nodding twice. Vestal virgins? I can see them. What's keeping our friend? He turned. A bevy of scampering newsboys rushed down the steps, scampering in all directions, yelling, their white papers fluttering. Hard after them, Miles Crawford appeared on the steps, his hat aureoling his scarlet face, talking with J.J. O'Malloy. Come along, the professor cried, waving his arm. He set off again to walk beside Stephen. Return of Bloom. Yes, he said, I see them. Mr. Bloom, breathless, caught in a whirl of wild newsboys near the offices of the Irish Catholic and Dublin Penny Journal, called, Mr. Crawford, a moment. Telegraph racing special. What is it? Miles Crawford said, falling back a pace. A newsboy cried in Mr. Bloom's face, terrible tragedy in Rathmines, a child bit by bellows. Interview with the editor. Just this ad, Mr. Bloom said, pushing through towards the steps, puffing and taking the cutting from his pocket. I spoke with Mr. Keyes just now. He'll give a renewal for 2 months, he says. After, he'll see. But he wants a par to call attention in the Telegraph too. The Saturday Pink. And he wants it, if it's not too late. I told Councillor Annetti from the Kilkenny People, I can have access to it in the National Library. House of Keys, don't you see? His name is Keys. It's a play on the name. But he practically promised he'd give the renewal. He wants just a little puff. Well, I tell him, Mr. Crawford, K.M.A. Will you tell him he can kiss my arse? Miles Crawford said, throwing out his arms for emphasis. Tell him that straight from the stable. Bit nervy. Look out for squalls. All off for a drink. Arm in arm. Lenihan's yachting cap. On the cadge beyond. Usual blarney. Wonder if that young Daedalus is the moving spirit. He's a good pair of boots on him today. Last time I saw him, he had his heels on view. Been walking in muck somewhere. Careless chap. What was he doing in Irish Town? Well, Mr. Bloom said, his eyes returning, if I can get the design, I suppose it's worth a short par. He'd give the ad, I think. I'll tell him. K-M-R-I-A. He can kiss my Royal Irish arse. Miles Crawford cried loudly over his shoulder. Anytime he likes, tell him. While Mr. Bloom stood weighing the point and about to smile, he strode on jerkily. Now,
Racing the Wind. Nulla Bona. Jack, he said, raising his hand to his chin. I'm up to here. I've been through the hoop myself. I was looking for a fellow to back a bill for me no later than last week. You must take the will for the deed. Sorry, Jack, with a heart and a half if I could raise the wind anyhow. J.J. O'Malloy pulled a long face and walked on silently. They caught up on the others and walked abreast. When they have eaten the brawn and the bread and wiped their 20 fingers in the paper the bread was wrapped in, they go nearer to the railings. Something for you, the professor explained to Miles Crawford. 2 old Dublin women on top of Nelson's pillar. Some column. That's what Wadler once said. That's new, Miles Crawford said. That's copy. Out for the waxies, Dargon. 2 old trixies, what? But they are afraid the pillar will fall, Stephen went on. They see the roofs and argue about where the different churches are. Rathmines, Blue Dome, Adam and Eve, St. Lawrence O'Toole's. But it makes them giddy to look, so they pull up their skirts. Now, next, please.
Those slightly rambunctious females. Easy all, Miles Crawford said. No poetic license. We're in the archdiocese here, and settled down on their striped petticoats, peering up at the statue of the one-handled adulterer. One-handled adulterer, the professor cried. I like that. I see the idea. I see what you mean. Dames donate Dublin's CITS speed pills. Velocitus Aeolus belief. Gives them a crick in their necks, Stephen said, and they're too tired to look up or down or to speak. They put the bag of plums between them and eat the plums out of it, one after another, wiping off with their handkerchiefs the plum juice that dribbles out of their mouths and spitting the plum stones slowly out between the railings. He gave a sudden loud laugh as close. Lenihan and Mr. O'Madden Burke, hearing, turned, beckoned, and led on across towards Mooney's. Finished? Miles Crawford said, so long as they do no worse. Sophist wallops, haughty Helen swear on proboscis Spartans, ganache molars, Ithacans, vow pen is champ. You remind me of the Antisthenes, the professor said, a disciple of Gorgias, the sophist. It is said of him that none could tell if he were bitterer against others as against himself. He was the son of a noble and a bondwoman, and he wrote a book in which he took away the palm of beauty from Argive Helen and handed it to poor Penelope. Poor Penelope. Penelope rich. They made ready to cross O'Connell Street. Next.
Hello there, Central. At various points along the 8 lines, tramcars with motionless trolleys stood in their tracks bound for or from Rathmines, Rathfarnham, Blackrock, Kingstown, Andokey, Sandymount Green, Ringsend and Sandymount Tower, Donnybrook, Palmerston Park and Upper Rathmines, all still, becalmed in short circuit. Hackney cars, cabs, delivery wagons, mail vans, private broughams, aerated mineral water floats with rattling crates of bottles, rattled, rolled, horse-drawn rapidly. What? And likewise, where? But what do you call it? Miles Crawford asked. Where do they get the plums? Susan.
Oh, Virgilian, says pedagogue, sophomore plumps for old man Moses. Call it, wait, the professor said, opening his long lips wide to reflect. Call it, let me see, call it Deus Nobus Haec Otia Fecit. No, Stephen said, I call it a Pisgah site of Palestine, or the parable of the plums. I see, the professor said. He laughed richly. I see, he said again with new pleasure. Moses and the promised land. We gave him that idea, he added to J.J. O'Malloy. Horatio is cynosure this fair June day. J.J. O'Malloy sent a weary sidelong glance toward the statue and held his peace. I see, the professor said. He halted on Sir John Gray's pavement island and peered aloft at Nelson through the meshes of his wry smile. Diminished digits proved too titillating for frisky frumps. Anne Wimbles, Flo Wangles, yet can you blame them? One-handed adulterer, he said, smiling grimly. That tickles me, I must say. Tickled the old ones too, Miles Crawford said, if the God Almighty's truth was known. Pineapple Rock, lemon plat, butterscotch. A sticky girl shoveling scoopfuls of creams for a Christian brother. Some school treat, bad for their tummies. Lozenge and comfit manufacturer to His Majesty the King. God save our sitting on his throne, sucking red jujubes white. A somber YMCA young man, watchful among the warm, sweet fumes of Graham lemons, placed a throwaway in a hand of Mr. Bloom. Heart-to-heart talks. Me? No. Blood of the Lamb. His slow feet walked him riverward, reading, Are you saved? All are washed in the blood of the Lamb. God wants blood victim, birth, hymen martyr, war, foundation of a building, sacrifice, kidney burnt offering, druids' altars. Elijah is coming. Dr. John Alexander Dowie, restorer of the church in Zion, is coming. Is coming, is coming, is coming. All heartily welcome. Paying game. Tory and Alexander last year. Polygamy. His wife will put the stopper on that. Where is that ad, some Birmingham firm? The luminous crucifix. Our Savior. Wake up in the dead of night and see him on the wall hanging. Pepper's ghost idea. Iron nails ran in.
Okay, that's great. That's great, Susan. We've got three more readers to go for symmetry's sake. So, but let's try to get the last three readings done in a total of about 5 minutes, so we have a little bit of time to talk. So, Michiko, if you could do a short reading.
Yes. Phosphorus, it must be done with. If you leave a bit of cold fish, for instance, I could see the bluey silver over it. Night, I went down to the pantry in the kitchen. Don't like all the smells in it waiting to rush out. What was it she wanted? The Malaga raisins, thinking of Spain, before Rudy was born. The phosphorescence, the bluey greeny, very good for the brain. More?
No, that's fine. That's fine. Jim, if you could do the same.
Okay, Duncan. From Butler's Monument House corner, he glanced along Bachelor's Walk. Dedalus' daughter there, still outside Dillon's auction rooms. Must be selling off some old furniture. Knew her eyes at once from the father, lobbying about, waiting for him. Home always breaks up when the mother goes. 15 children he had, birth every year almost. That's in their theology, or the priest won't give the poor woman the confession, the absolution. Increase and multiply. Did you ever hear such an idea? Eat you out of house and home, no families themselves to feed, living on the fat of the land. Their butteries and lathers, I'd like to see them do the black fast Yom Kippur. Cross buns, one meal and collation, for fear he'd collapse on the altar. A housekeeper of one of those fellows, if you could pick it out of her. Never pick it out of her. Letting go LSD out of him. Does himself well. No guests. All for number one. Watching his water. Bring your own bread and butter. His reverence. Mum's the word. Dave?
Good.
Good Lord, that poor child's dress is in flitters. Underfed she looks too. Potatoes and Marge and potatoes. It's after they feel it. Proof of the pudding. Undermines the Constitution. Good.
Okay. And what we'll do when we come back next week is we will start at the beginning with Pineapple Rock. Good reading. I don't know about anybody else, but this was, for me, this reading of this chapter was more enlightening for me than any other time that I've read it. It's like, it may just be the number of times, but I think everybody did really good at the reading also. But I think in addition to the number of times is I just suddenly got it, or got it at a deeper level than before.
Can you say more about that, Duncan? What, for example?
Oh God, Joyce is just destroying the newspaper business. And these bombastic, already slightly drunk in the morning guys that are just, they're like an older Mulligan. You know, who are just all they can do is use silly jokes and irony and bombast.
Yeah.
And you know, Susan, you had your hand up.
I appreciated that too, but for me, the breakthrough in this chapter is, for the first time that I'm aware of, the point of view is handed off from Bloom to Stephen and back again. And the suspense, are they going to be in the same place at the same time, is what got me through this very long newspaper office scene, because that's what the reader is hoping for. And shifting gears between Bloom and Stephen is really, it's exciting.
Yeah, there's a lot here.
Did I just come in there, Duncan?
Of course, please do.
Just wanted to say that my overall impression of this episode was that it was very closely aligned to the Odyssey, to the Aeolus episode in the Odyssey. Aeolus being the the king of storms and winds, and getting Odysseus or Ulysses getting a present from Aeolus of a bag of winds, but his crewmen were jealous and figured that might be gold in this bag. But of course, when they opened the bag, the storms broke loose, and instead of guiding them safely home, they were blown back off course. And of course, all the way through this, you used the word bombastic, I think, which it is. All these guys are talking a lot of balls, really.
Yeah, it's the almost everything they say is nonsense. And their leader, their reputed leader, Miles Crawford, is drunk. I mean, he's just drunk as a skunk. So, yeah.
Mr. Bloom is the only fellow doing a day's work.
That's a good point, Anne.
Yes.
And it's one of the number of things in this chapter that sets him apart as an outsider.
There is one portion of this episode, or the one that we just finished, the impromptu, where there is a recording of Joyce reading part of that passage. It's the only recording of Joyce reading from Ulysses. I don't know if you all have heard it, but it's worth listening to it. And he says, Joyce apparently says the only passage that could be lifted out of Ulysses, and the only one that was declamatory and therefore suitable for recital. That's what Joyce said.
Okay.
Is there a link for that reading, Katrina?
Yes, I'll put it in the chat. It's wonderful to hear.
There's a line too in page 110 of the Wordsworth edition. Second line, he said, "But it's everybody eating everybody else. That's what life is all. That's what life is after all." And then the next few pages on, he mentions Hamlet. Now there's a scene from Hamlet where he kills this guy Polonius, and everybody is looking for Polonius. And Hamlet says he's at supper, not where he's eaten, but not where he eats, but where he is eaten. And I suppose in a way it's like there's a kind of a double take there. I would expect newspaper editors to be very learned men, and certainly not to be drunk in the middle of the day. So I'm sort of seeing.
Yeah. For those who were also at the Monday reading, I hope you appreciated Ignatius Gallagher appearing again in this section as an example of an excellent journalist, and then of course the example is totally ridiculous. Yeah.
A little cloud.
But I like these little tiny things too, like in the very beginning on page 106 in the Wordsworth, when Bloom is talking to Nannetti. And Bloom has this very curious thought. It's under the section that says how a great daily organ has turned out. And the beginning of the second sentence is in Bloom's head, and it says, "Strange, he never saw his real country, Ireland, my country."
Yeah, because Naneshi is Italian, isn't he?
He's got an Italian last name.
Italian descent, yeah.
Yeah, but of course this is Bloom undercutting Bloom's position. Although Bloom seems to be totally unaware of what he's doing here, which I appreciate on this ironic level, that Bloom, who is always being treated like a stranger, in this particular instance, it's kind of treating Nannetti the same way, at least in his mind, in his thinking. as if Nanetti, who I think, and maybe Joe can enlighten me on this, I think Nanetti actually was born in Ireland, and he's actually going to be elected to the town
Lord,
council or something
yeah,
like
Lord
that.
Mayor. He's Lord Mayor. He became Lord Mayor of Dublin.
Okay. But he certainly has every much of a claim to being Irish as Bloom does. And yet Bloom makes this distinction here, which I think is once again, this is Joyce not pulling any punches. He's not trying to give us a totally unblemished hero.
It's a good point.
And Gabriel Conroy turns up,
Mm-hmm.
which is always fascinating how he brings these other characters in.
Yeah. Yeah, and the lemon soap. How many times is Bloom going to forget about that bar of lemon soap? You know, we just had the Hades section where he's sitting, he gets into the coach and he realizes, what's that? What am I sitting on? And then he goes, oh, the lemon soap. And then here we are just one section later and we have a similar thing.
And there was, I'm sorry.
No, please.
Well, something about the hat too. I misplaced it here, but referring to the hat that he mentioned, where the guy had a ding in his hat. I forget.
John Henry Menton.
Yeah, and he mentions that here again, something about, well, he could have phrased it another way about the hat. He's thinking back, maybe he should have said it more tactfully. So that goes back to that chapter as well.
Mm-hmm.
Duncan, on a slightly other tack as well, to underline your point about the limitations, shall we say, of the people in the newspaper office. Crawford gets the year wrong for the Phoenix Park murders, and I didn't pick that up until somebody pointed it out to me. It's line 632, 1112 in the Gabler edition. That was 81, 6th of May. It was actually 1882 when they happened.
Mm-hmm.
This is the editor of the paper. I mean, Biden's getting chased because he can't remember the years when he was vice president. But here's an editor of a newspaper can't remember the year of an incredibly important event, really, in Irish history.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say for the condition that the editor was in at all times or approximate. Could I just mention that there was a discussion at our class last evening about racism? And it goes back to the point you made, Duncan, about Nanetti being Irish and Bloom being Irish. And Stephen is having a discussion with DC before he gets paid. And DC is talking about, that the Irish had no problem with Jews. He goes on to say, we never let them in. And of course, what he means by that is he never let them integrate. And we see this happening to Bloom all the way through Ulysses, that as much as he's trying to be part of everything that's going on, he's still a bit of an outsider.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that's in part the desire on the others who consider him an outsider, needing outsiders so they think they're insiders.
Yes. Correct.
Because of course,
which is one of the hallmarks of racism, right? You are the in group, and then other people are in the out group.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, I mean, we have this phenomena which is brought up occasionally of the English looking down on the Irish, you know. If you haven't seen, this is for the people who are the American readers. If you have not seen the cartoons of British cartoonists and their portrayal of Irish, you really need to see it. They're every bit as scurrilous as the most racist of Americans drawing cartoons of black people with watermelon and big lips and kinky hair. I mean, they're just totally outrageous cartoons.
So
Oh.
Punch magazine, I think, published a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
However, one would have a concern that in the modern Ireland, that racism is alive and well, particularly in the context of Ukrainian refugees and people who are trying to immigrants from war-torn countries like Syria. And we find now that buildings that are proposed to house them are being burnt down. So not a good scene.
Yeah, no, it's a serious, it's a global problem.
Yeah, particularly against our history, I mean, there's always the story of Irish immigrants going to the States and seeing the signs, no blacks or Irish may apply, But, that's coming home to roost a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What does somebody want to comment on Joyce's playfulness in this chapter? Because if there's a rhetorical device that he doesn't trot out in this chapter, I'd like to know. He's so incredibly playful with the language. And the chapter I think that the twin for me of this chapter is Oxen of the Sun, where again, I mean, he's just unbridled in terms of how he plays with the language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. Let's see if I can put my hands on. Oh, yeah.
But Joe, we haven't heard from you.
That might come as a relief to some.
Not at all. Not at all.
I love to hear your take on it, Joe.
There's so much there. There's at least 6 underlying plots running at the one time.
Mm-hmm.
Really, you'd need an hour to discuss it. It's like, what about the assassination of General Bobrikov? Anyone kind of homing in on that? Did you even notice it? It's the big news event of the 16th of June, 1904. Is the assassination in Estonia of the equivalent of the vice-regal representative in Dublin. I can't remember the Russian's title, but a very cruel ruler, imperial ruler of Finland, and he was assassinated by a nationalist. That's the big news, and it gets about 2 lines in their minds.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately they go to the Phoenix Park murders off the top of the head, and the irony is they are in 12 years time, the building they're in will be shelled by the British to the ground. And these guys, journalists, have their finger on the pulse of the nation. They're 22 years behind.
Mhm.
They don't get a whiff of it at all. And of course, for Joyce, it had happened because he's writing this after 1916. So the huge ironies running through the whole thing. What's J.J. O'Malloy doing there? He doesn't work there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Can I just say, Joe, that it's interesting you mention Estonia, because at the end of Finnegan's Wake, Joyce says, Eblana sama sita, And apparently Samasita is Estonian for same shit. So basically, Eblana is Dublin,
Yeah.
same city, same shit. So Joyce's opinion of Dublin hasn't
It
changed.
was actually a slip of the tongue. I meant to say Finland. So I confess to that.
Thanks for the opening, Joe.
But there you go. But that phrase "raising the wind" is Dublinese for raising a loan. He's trying to borrow money. He's kind of a loan, a personal loan from the editor, and he's saying, "Sorry, I'm trying to, I try to discount a bill myself, and I can't get anyone. Take, consider the wish, the deed. I wish I could." And all that, all these things are running there, as well as Bloom's stuff. So, there's the vorticism, the vorticist movement in art, the noise of the city, the barrels, the drums, the machinery going. Who was it that read the machinery really well? Clump, 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 clump. Clump, 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 3-4 timer, this sort of stuff. So you could dig in there, and you could be here till next week talking about it. All that. But there you go. If the underlining, as Donna says, the underlying thing, the story of Aeolus and being blown back down to Joyce, Odysseus tries to bring his 12 ships in again. They've just wintered there, and Aeolus, and he tells them, "You're a man cursed by the gods, be off." He refuses them permission to anchor again. That's kiss my arse, kiss my Royal Irish arse. That's he is Aeolus in the thing. The foolish crew who open the bag. They're the headlines. Those headlines added very late by Joyce. They grow increasingly ridiculous. The very last one, they represent the crew. So he's kind of the 1881. He's kind of O'Malloy is kind of right on the 1881. That's the year in which the invincible movements were formed. You see, they formed in December 1881, and then they did their murder in 6th of May 1882. Very easy to remember because it's the year Joyce was born. So it kind of stuff like that running down to there. And the comparison between the Israelites and the Irish is one that's often made. Was always made by Irish nationalism, and I remember it at school. Like we were baffled how a state coming into existence in 1948 could bring a language, an ancient language, into everyday use. And we'd been at it since 1922, and very few of us could say more than our names in Irish, after 11 years of training to each of us, what were we doing wrong, sort of thing. But that's not in that. But that, and then why did that's the only piece of Ulysses that we've a recording of Joyce reading, and it's a very affectated declamation, as who was it, Katrina said, but it's like, of all the pieces in this book to read. That's very strange, if I'd written it, I'd pick a humorous piece to read, but that's what he chose. So there you go. That's enough from me. You don't want to hear me.
Well, no, actually, I was going to propose, and once again, in having a group of this nature, it's always a question of how deep do people want to go. And actually, I would not myself, when we meet next week, I wouldn't mind spending more time looking at some of the stuff in this particular section. I mean, I know that I underlined an awful lot of things. And I think it's also important, to me, it's an important chapter because with the Pishka's view of, the whatever, his story, Joyce is actually pointing out why he would not be a good newspaper man as journalism is composed at this time. And then he reinforces that with the early parts of the next chapter, which we read a little bit of this time. Because there's so much in Aeolus which is just windy. It's just abstract and windy and schoolboy nonsense. And then when in the Tale of the Plums, the part that really strikes me is all the little details of the everyday details that Stephen Dedalus mentions about the two ladies and how physical it is and very much down the ground, just like when we start the next chapter, it starts off with all kinds of physical sensations, etc. So, I mean, if there's interest in that, I would like to do that, at least in the beginning, and then we can read after we complete whatever discussion we want to have. We could go on and begin reading a bit more of the next section.
I would be up for that.
Sounds good. Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
good. Just while it's still hot, I did want to say, Joe, thank you for pointing out the business of comparing the Irish to the Israelites. I think that's a good reference because Israel is seen as a shining example here, and yet it's juxtaposed with the anti-Semitism of the chapter as well. So you're getting with one hand and taking from the other, and I don't think it had crystallized in my mind quite until you pointed that out. Thank you.
Yeah. Good man, Dave.
Okay. So, with that in mind, if the various readers have things that they've underlined and they want to think about, when we come back, let's see if how the discussion goes. I mean, it may be cold by the time we get back next week, or it may still be hot. I would recommend, if you get a chance, just a casual review of what we read today. And I want to point out, I think this is a pretty good book.
Oh yeah.
And it goes through each chapter and it points out the various rhetorical devices that are used. It's
What
quite,
is it? What is the name of it?
it's called
Ulysses?
Ulysses Unbound, a reader's companion to Joyce's Ulysses by Terence Killeen, Killeen. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I hope to see you all back next week so we can continue.
Yes.
Bye, Duncan. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
So everyone,
Bye,
thanks.
Stephen.